School Readiness Unit.
Thank you. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We do have quite a few people on the webinar tonight. So all the phone lines, we have them all on mute from our end. And we do that to prevent feedback and unintended disturbances from noise and stuff. We will stop periodically, however, throughout the webinar to address any questions or comments that you have. So as we're going, if you have any questions or comments that you would like to state, type those into the questions box, which is in your control panel. And we will stop, like I said, periodically, and we will read those out loud and then address them so that everyone on the webinar can benefit from both the question and the answer. Additionally, in the handout section of your webinar menu, there are 5 documents in there. One is a copy of this presentation in PDF format. So it's not the actual PowerPoint, but it is the PowerPoint slides in PDF format, and that's just for size because the PowerPoint is quite large. And then there's also a copy of the joint Department of Education and Department of Human Health and Services policy statement regarding expulsion and suspension prevention. There's also a copy of OEL's position statement. And then there are 2 resources from the state of Arkansas, actually. We pulled those specifically because we thought they were good resources for you to look at and see what other states are doing with regard to expulsion and prevention and what kind of guidance they give to their providers on developing those policies. So that's all there in the handout section of the webinar. In addition, once all of these webinars from today and tomorrow are concluded, we are recording this, and then after the conclusion of all the webinars, we'll be taking the best recording out of the 4 and posting it to our website, which I'm going to show you how to get there real quick just so everybody can see. And if you go to our website, which is floridaearlylearning.com, up here at the top, there's some purple tabs. And on this statewide initiatives purple tab, if you click on health and safety, this is kind of our landing page for all of the new stuff that's been happening with regard to health and safety, particularly for the school readiness program, but it also benefits all child care providers. But on this page, we'll be adding a folder titled Expulsion and Suspension Prevention. And in that folder, we'll be putting all of those references or those resources. We'll be putting the video of the webinar as well as a copy of the PowerPoint. And then also all of the links to the resources and tools that we talk about throughout the webinar. We'll be hosting all of those right there. So that will be how you can get to all of this stuff. And hopefully we'll have that posted by the end of next week. It takes a little bit of time for it to convert and stuff. So additionally, at the end of the webinar, we'll have our contact information that you can email us questions or call us if you have any questions after the fact. So that being said, let me get the webinar pulled back up and we will get started. I'm going to turn it over to Erin.
Okay, so expulsion is a really exciting issue to talk about in the sense of it's not exciting when it happens, but it's exciting that we are talking about it. And it's been something that's been on the radar, but we really want to put it in the forefront of saying, how can we help prevent this practice or limit it or make sure that people feel equipped and ready to help children and support them through some of the most influential years in their life. And so we're going to go through a little bit of that today. We first will go through the overview of the issue. So here is the data that we have found. Here's what national sources are telling us. Then we're going to talk about why that matters. What does that information tell us about what's happening to our children and to our society because of this process of expulsion and suspension and dismissal? And then we're going to go through a little bit of federal and state policies and guidance. We'll go into some best practices because I know many of you are sitting there thinking, how in the world are we going to be able to do this? We already have so much on our plate. And so our goal is to really give you some small shifts that you can make, a few things that you can just work into your way of work. And then that things like that can actually change and make a difference in your practice that could really influence the. And then lastly, we'll go through giving you some examples, how to write your policy, give you some samples of language that you can use, and just be here to answer questions towards the end. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So when we walk into this topic, one of the things we discovered is that people often say expulsion as a blanket term to cover all of these things, all of the different types of termination of care for children. And so what we found is we actually have 3 different types of things happening in our field. We wanted really to break these out so we could have a conversation specifically targeting which one of these we want to address. We obviously are addressing all of them, but it helps us really to frame them up so we understand what the term means defined under these definitions. So expulsion is the termination of the enrollment of the child from the early learning program, typically due to challenging behaviors, sometimes health conditions. So expulsion is when you permanently remove a child from your care. Suspension is just like expulsion, but it's for a shorter amount of time. And then dismissal is something we wanted to pull out and actually spend a little bit more time talking about, because dismissal is when you remove a child from an early learning program due to factors other than the child's behavior. And so this typically happens for some of these reasons. We know that dismissal is often parent-related, but what we want to do is really just take a second and make sure that we understand that this is a separate issue, because this still breaks the continuity of care for a child. And while we know that you have to run a business and we know that there are things that you really just have to draw the line in the sand about, we want to make sure that we have a plan for these as well. It's really, really important to have a process be related to the child, so then the child doesn't suffer from losing that primary caregiver or losing you in the process when you may be the best thing for the child beyond their parents. And so we really want to make sure that we have a plan for dismissals as well. So that's just a brief overview really fast, because we wanted to make sure as we use those terms throughout the training that you understand expulsion, suspension, and dismissal are not all the same thing.
So I am going to tell you the story of Charlie. This story was told at the What's Behind Preschool Expulsion Congressional Briefing, and it was told by Claire Lerner with the 0 to 3 organization. So I'm just going to do a rendition of this story. So this is take 1, Charlie and Miss Tina. Hi everyone, my name is Charlie. I just turned 3 and I'm on my way to preschool. My mommy is really stressed out. We had a crazy morning. There's just so much to do, and my daddy leaves for work super early, so my mommy has to do it all by herself. She has to get my brother and sister ready to make their bus on time, and then she has to get me to school so she can go to her daytime job. That's right, mommy has to work 2 jobs, one at night and one during the day, just so we can keep our apartment and not have to move in with Aunt Teresa. Our car ride is super tense. Mommy isn't happy with me because I dilly-dallied. I just have a really hard time getting organized in the morning, and I wasn't ready in time. I'm not feeling too good about myself right now. When we get to school, I don't want to say goodbye to Mommy. I hate it when she's mad at me. I start to cry and won't let her go. My teacher, Miss Tina, tells me it's time to say goodbye and that I need to find something to do. I'm frozen. I look around the room at all the kids playing, but I'm so upset I can't even think. My feelings are just starting to take over my brain. Then Joey arrives. I am so happy to see him. I pull on his arm to take him over to the sand table to play. But oh no, he says I'm hurting him. Miss Tina comes over with an angry, scrunched up face and tells me, let go of Joey immediately. She shouts, Charlie, I have told you 1,000 times that you cannot grab your friends. You need to use your words. No one will want to play with you if you hurt them. She acts like I did it on purpose. I didn't mean to hurt Joey. I'm just not so good with words yet. Miss Tina tells me that I can have a seat at the table all by myself. I'm sad and alone, and all the kids are looking at me like, there goes Charlie again, back in timeout. Then it's circle time, which I love, but it's very hard for me to sit still. I just feel all jumpy inside. My brain is telling me not to move, but my body just wants to keep going. So I get this idea to hop up and down like the frog in the book we're reading. The other kids start to get up and jump just like me. But in her angry voice, Miss Tina tells everybody to sit right back down. Then she looks at me and says that since I can't control my body, I have to go sit at a table away from the group. I am always getting into trouble. Later on the playground, a bunch of kids are playing a chasing game that looks like so much fun, so I join in. I'm going really fast and I'm getting so excited. I get really close to Layla and tag her, but she falls down and shouts, you can't play, Charlie. Miss Tina shouts, Charlie, you can't play with your friends if you're going to hurt them. Tell Layla you're sorry and take a time out. But I didn't mean to hurt Layla. I am so mad I pick up a whole handful of mulch and throw it. Miss Tina says, okay, Charlie, you're done. Time to call your mom to pick you up. Mommy arrives and is fuming, like in the cartoons where the fire comes out of people's ears. Miss Tina tells her as if I'm not even there. Charlie has no self-control and is putting other kids in danger. He can't come to school if he can't behave. My mommy starts to cry. She asks, what in the world is wrong with me, and how is she supposed to work if she can't take me anywhere? If I can't go back to school, I won't get to learn how to be a good friend, which I want so badly. And I won't get to learn all that cool stuff Miss Tina shares with us at circle time, or make those fun projects, or be in charge of the calendar, or give out snacks. All those things that make me feel like such a big boy and a team player. Now I feel even more out of control inside, not less. So why does expulsion matter? There are a lot of concerns with regard to expulsion. Of course, there's the concerns from the providers. How do you ensure that you still have an effective program and you are ensuring the safety of all the children and the staff that are in your program when you have kids who are experiencing these challenging behaviors or being aggressive, or even parents who are being aggressive? There are also concerns from parents. There's concerns from the parent of the child who's actually being bullied or pushed. There are concerns from that parent that if their child were to retaliate, then that child's going to get in trouble too and possibly be expelled. There are concerns of the parent with the child that has these challenging behaviors. They don't know what to do most times, or don't know of or have access to resources that can help them. And lastly, there are also concerns from the community surrounding expulsions. Oftentimes, members of the community don't even realize that children are being expelled at these young ages. And then when they do find out, they're actually shocked and surprised to hear about it. There are some communities that realize it's a problem, but don't have access to resources or intervention programs, such as the case with rural areas or areas with large migrant populations or dual language learners, which can also add an element of communication and language barriers. So I'm going to actually play a video now from the Congressional Briefing on childhood expulsion.
Young children in pre-K program are expelled over 3 times the rate of K through 12. And when you're talking about child care programs, it's more than 13 times the rate of K through 12. Expulsion undermines early childhood education. We expend a lot of money to provide early care and education programs, and the reason why is because it pays a dividend to us. They pay us back in terms of return on investment, but when we expel children who need the services the most from the program, we undercut the business model of early care and out the children who are likely to give us our biggest return on investment out of the service. Ultimately, the children who need preschool programs, who need a school readiness program the most, are the children we would want to expel from a preschool program. That's who needs to be in there. That's the reason we have programs in the first place.
Members of Congress need to understand this issue because it impacts in so many ways, and it is also it's such a critical issue, and one that has so many overtones of racial disparity as well, that we have to look at what is going on. The story you told of it is poignant. It really is. What is the effect of that expulsion? That is what we've got to plumb. What happens to the individual child when this happens?
So children like Charlie are not purposely misbehaving or making trouble. They have what we call regulatory systems, have a hard time controlling their reactions to emotional and physical stimulation, which leads to impulsive and disorganized behaviors. Stress and chaotic environments at home and in the community can also result in poor self-regulation. When children feel out of control on the inside, they act out of control on the outside. The fact is that even without challenges to their sensory systems or significant stress in their world, children under 3 have very little self-control. Challenging behaviors rarely surface overnight. The roots are often seeded in infancy and toddlerhood. Parents and other caregivers need support in identifying babies' unique needs, providing sensitive, responsive care from the start, and helping children learn to manage their strong emotions and impulses, not shame and punish them for behaviors they cannot control. Punitive, harsh approaches erode children's self-esteem, decrease their ability to self-regulate, and lead to an increase versus reduction in maladaptive behaviors.
Kids aren't doing bad. Why are these kids acting like this? And then it dawned on me, the environment.
These kids are exposed to stuff that some of us in a lifetime have never seen. They live in homes where police are raiding their houses on a daily basis. Some of our children are desensitized to some of the things that they see. So it means nothing to them when we're trying to nap and we hear helicopters, police cars, sirens. We had one day where we couldn't even leave out the building because the police were using our vehicles to watch other people out there who were making drug transactions. These are real-life stories that we experienced. So what we did was we brought in some training for our staff. We started working in what we call SAPSA training, trauma-informed training, where our staff can learn not just the educational piece, but also the things that trigger these children and where these things are coming from. Once the staff was able to get that training, they were able to work a little bit better with the children. Not saying that it's all good, but it is a lot better.
So one of the primary objectives of early education is to teach children critical social, emotional, and self-regulation skills that will then set them up for later success in school and life and ultimately empower them to be our future leaders. When we expel or suspend children as young as 3 and 4, and sometimes even younger, we are actually doing just the opposite of this. And instead, we set their trajectory in a negative direction before they've even had their first day of kindergarten. So as stated in the video, preschool expulsions are 3 times more common than expulsions that happen in the K-12 system. And then when you add in child care expulsions, those are actually 13 times more common than kindergarten through 12th grade expulsions. And that's a large number. These expulsions, not only do they undermine a return on investment that we're investing, but they're also connected to many adverse outcomes that will continue on into that child's adolescence and then later on into their adulthood. Oftentimes when we are expelling children, we're removing those children that benefit the most from these programs in the first place. And then, of course, there's the issue of the bias that is inherent in expulsion and how these expulsions are shown to be disproportionately administered to young boys and young girls of color or other racial and gender socioeconomic status disparities.
So we're going to do another look and a deep dive into these numbers. So we've seen that we know the rates are high, but a lot of times we don't necessarily think that they could be affecting us. And so we wanted to take a look into a couple of different states to see what we found. We didn't find actually 0 to 3 found, but Walter Gilliam found, but this is an example of how deep this issue is really rooted all across our nation, and then we'll talk about it when we get done.
So what was it that we found in terms of the results? Well, we found that 10% of the preschool teachers expelled at least one child in the past 12 months because of a behavior problem, which means 10% of all the preschool classrooms had at least 12 months. What else did we find? Of the classrooms that were expelling, 78% said only one child in the last 12 months, 15% said 2 children, 6% said I've expelled 3 last year, 1% said I've expelled 4 children last year. When we piloted this in Massachusetts in child care programs, we had one child care teacher who reported expelling 6 children out of a class of 16 in 1 month's time. That's a lot of expulsion. It's so much expulsion that when you see that much expulsion, you have to think, maybe it's not just about the children's behavior. Maybe there's some other things at play that could actually be accounting for this. So we computed out what the expulsion rate was. We found that there's about 7 expulsions per every 1,000 children enrolled in these state-funded pre-K programs. And then when we compared it to other data that was collected by the Office of Civil Rights at about that time for the U.S. Department of Education regarding K through 12 children, we found that the K through 12 rate was 2.1 per 1,000. So in other words, these children in state-funded preschool programs were being expelled at a rate more than 3 times that of children in K through 12. But it doesn't just end there. We found that when you look at child care programs, not state-funded preschool programs out in the public arena, many of which are accepting public dollars, that the rates of expulsion are much higher. 28 per thousand in Detroit. In our pilot study in Massachusetts in child care programs, we found a rate of 27 per thousand children enrolled. 39% of the child care classrooms in Massachusetts reported expelling at least one child in the past 12 months, which means that if your child was in a child care program in Massachusetts, your child has about a 40% chance of either being expelled or being in a classroom with a child who has been expelled. That's a lot of expulsion on a per classroom basis. Look down here at the Illinois data that we have there. 42% of the centers reporting at least one expulsion in the past 12 months. Let me tell you what's unique about that piece of data. Those 42%, the study that they're talking about there, that was all infant toddler child care centers, serving children 0 to 2 years old. So even when you're talking about really young children, the rates at which children can lose their placements and parents scrambling trying to figure out what to do, because if they don't have the child care, they may lose their job too. Because one of the things to remember is this: when we expel children from preschool programs, in many cases it means expelling their parents from work because they don't have child care anymore.
So these are just a few of the numbers that we heard in that slide, in that video. And one of the things we wanted to point out is that this is not just a preschool problem. It is a preschool all the way through infant toddler care problem, which is still preschool, obviously, but an early education problem. We have an early childhood education expulsion problem that we need to really address. And so this nationally is pretty detrimental when you think about the consequences of what expulsion does for society. And so because of this, the U.S. Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services got together, and they put together a federal joint policy statement. They took a stance to say, we want to do something about this. We want to start a conversation that can work its way down to states and make its way into the doors of the provider to start thinking about this a little bit differently. And so here are some of the things that they addressed. One of the things they discussed was having a clear, appropriate, and address disruptive behavior. So unpacking that a little bit, what that means is that we need to take a look at what we expect from children, and we need to take a look at what consequences we're applying so that we actually can meet the children where they are and help address the missing skills or the lack of connection that we see in young children. The next place that they wanted to start a conversation was looking at racial, gender, and cultural equity across all of the settings. So as Molly mentioned earlier, we see a huge disparity in our young boys of color being disproportionately expelled. And so what does that mean for our field, and how do we address that issue? Then another conversation to start was that they really wanted to look at inclusion practices. How are we dealing with situations where we have a child who's in need of services and hasn't accessed them yet? How do we make sure that services are available to children in our schools and to their families as well? And so we wanted to make sure that we incorporated these into ours. And so we followed suit and created our position statement here in Florida.
In response to the federal joint policy statement, OEL has developed a position statement on expulsion and suspension for coalitions and providers. OEL's position statement provides ways to support the provider, the family, and the child, and ultimately to prevent or severely limit the occurrence of expulsion and suspension in early childhood settings. The position statement has quality indicators that focus on positive and developmentally appropriate classroom environments and practices, the social and emotional development of young children, and the screening of young children to identify potential challenges that need to be addressed early. Parent engagement is an important part of this process and is different from parent involvement. An example of parent involvement would be when the parent comes to school for a parent conference and learns about the child's progress. The teacher talks to them and shows them things the child has done. An example of parent engagement would be that the parent is engaged with the child's learning and development at home and at school, that the parent asks questions and seeks information. If there are problems with the child's progress or behavior, the teacher or provider would ask the parent to meet and give them information about the child's behavior or abilities at home. The school and home environment, as well as expectations for the child in both settings, would be discussed jointly. The school and family would work together to make a plan to support the success of the child. The policy statement encourages collaboration with parents and also with mental health consultants when possible, and it encourages providers and the coalitions to support these children who may need services. We hope to expand data collection and analysis so that we can truly gauge where the state of Florida is with regards to this issue. There are quality indicators in the position statement that will help coalitions and providers in the development of their own policies and practices. We emphasize that professional development is key. It's essential to the success of your policy. It equips teachers with the knowledge and skills and abilities needed to identify and support children who display challenging behaviors. And all of these things in the policy are aimed at preventing or limiting the practice of expulsion as a disciplinary tool.
So what does this mean for coalitions and providers? As a result of the Child Care Development Block Grant reauthorization that happened in 2014, we affectionately term this program in Florida the School Readiness Program, but changes to this program that happened in 2014 now require that states provide consumer education to families, providers, and the community, specifically with regard to state policies that talk about the social, emotional, and behavioral health of preschool-age children, as well as expulsion of preschool-age children in early childhood settings. So in addition, that's where our OEL position statement stems from that requirement for us to share that kind of consumer education with the community and with families. In addition to that, the Office of Early Learning was required to establish health and safety standards for child care providers that participate in the school readiness program. And within these health and safety standards, there was a new requirement that was put into place that requires school readiness program providers to have written policies and procedures regarding both discipline as well as expulsion of children that are in their care. These policies, they go into effect, this requirement goes into effect July 1st of 2017, but in addition to having the policy must be given to all parents or guardians of children in their care, and the program must ensure that they maintain signature from the parent stating that they have accepted or acknowledged that they've received this policy. And then, of course, everyone within that program must comply with whatever is set in their procedures and policies. Sorry, you shut them where to get that. So, just realized that.
All right. So why is it so important to have a plan on how you will handle challenging behaviors in the classroom? Why is it that you should plan ahead? Well, there are two ways of work. There's reactive and proactive. So if you're reactive and you're the way you work, something happens, an event occurs, and then you just take an action, and you have to make decisions right on the spot. If you're proactive, you have a plan in place, and that helps you to react quickly and to react positively and in a way that's helpful instead of harmful. When a traumatic event occurs, how do we address what happens? I'm going to use a personal story to kind of illustrate this. On May 5th, 1978, a tornado came up out of the Gulf of Mexico in Pinellas County and hit an elementary school. It was just a few miles from the school in which I taught kindergarten. In fact, I had been offered the position teaching kindergarten at that school. The portable classrooms in the kindergarten classes at High Point Elementary School were destroyed. 2 kindergarten students died when the roof collapsed in their classroom. Teachers and students were injured, and it was chaos. Parents came and took their children away, or other family members and friends came and took children away from the school grounds. The school officials did not know where the children were, and if they were missing or if they were with their parents, they were underneath the rubble. Teachers were injured. They weren't able to identify the children, and they were not able to identify parents if those were the parents of the children that they were picking up. So afterwards, a plan was instituted to have children wear name tags with parental information on it, how to get students inside to a weight-bearing wall, and have a spot where parents would go to check out their children. They would know who was absent from school that day, and they would have teachers on the grade level get to know each other's children so they could help to locate children and they could identify children. So they came up with a whole entire different plan for the whole district after this event, because now they wanted to be proactive instead of reactive and make sure that they were doing the best for families and children at their schools. When a traumatic event occurs, how do we address what is happening as it occurs? So if you're in an emergency situation, such as a tornado, and you feel panicked, the reason you feel panicked in an emergency is the result of your body's automatic overproduction of the stress hormone, cortisol. Cortisol goes to the brain and slows down the prefrontal cortex, which is the reason responsible for planning complex action. By overriding your body's reaction, you can continue to access your critical thinking skills. You won't be responding from emotion, but from rational thought. This happens by making a plan and knowing how to react when an event occurs. After the situation subsides and everything calms down, you can better assess the success of the plan and make changes as needed. So when a child picks up a block and throws it and hits another child and they're bleeding, that same thing happens in your brain. When a child falls off the top of a climber and breaks their arm, the same things happen unless you have a plan in place. So if you have a plan in place, you can act rationally and you can make sure that everyone's safe and secure. OEL's position statement helps learning coalitions and providers design a plan that works for their needs. Similar to emergency preparedness plans, having a plan, policy, or procedures in place regarding discipline and expulsion will help not only the provider, but the teachers, the families, and ultimately the children by giving them the tools necessary to respond to issues proactively rather than reactively. When you have a plan in place, if anyone questions what happened or occurred in a situation, you always go back to your plan to show that you followed the appropriate steps.
Okay, so how do you make that plan? We know we have to have a plan. We know this is important. And what needs to be in our plan? How do we begin to address this issue? So for most of you, it's 6 o'clock. You're exhausted. If you have been working all day, this is a lot of information to take in. So what we're going to do is just go through a couple of small shifts that you can make. So you can walk away. Nothing hard, nothing that costs any money. So we're going to start walking through some things. But our goal at the end of this is to help you feel supported and help make sure that you know that we're here and you know that you can handle these situations as they arise. So our first best practice we really wanted to take a step into is inclusion. What do we do when we see a challenging behavior? And so regardless of what the challenging behavior is, we want to make sure that we've observed and got information. So gathering information can happen beyond just observation. So we wanted to go into a couple of different ways that you could actually gather some information. So the first one obviously is observation, as I said. This is just looking at the child, looking at the environment, looking at the interactions that are happening, just watching the child and getting as much information as you can in the patterns of the behavior. The next step would be to get information from the families and give information to the families. So you're sharing information about what's happening at school and at home so that you can make the best decisions. Another way to get information is to really think about a team that could come around you and support the teacher, support the director, support the family, anybody around you that can get together to work to support this child and their family. So the idea behind this is let's not do this alone, let's work together. And as we get together as a team, we can start to share information at a better rate. Then we can actually start making good decisions for the child. Screening is another really great way to get information. Most of the, so your coalitions have access to the ASQ screening as well as the ASQ SE2 screening. And these are just really brief screenings to give you a high-level flag if something seems to be behind. Now, if you want to dig a little bit deeper, you can go into a child assessment and start seeing if you have any delays showing up in any of the domains in there. And that just gives you a little bit of a deeper story that the screening covered as a surface area. Another way to get information is to look at current IFSPs and IEPs. These are individualized family support plans or service plans, depending on who is describing them, and an individualized education plan. Now, the IFSP is for, And your IEPs are your 3 through 5-year-olds and older. So this is the plan that a child would have going along with them if they were accessing services. And what's happening in these plans and what are actually inside of these plans will actually give you good information to then implement those strategies inside of your classroom to help support the child. So if you're thinking about how do I get information to even start this process, these are just a few of the tools you can use. So we're going to go on. And one of the things we wanted to help be understandable around the state is what kinds of access to supports do you have? Who is out there? Who runs what? I remember when I was a provider, I could never remember who took care of my birth through 2, who took care of 3 through 5, how do they transition? All of that was just a lot to understand. So we try to simplify this down. So you'll notice that in both columns you have a warm line and inclusion specialist. These are your coalition staff members that are there to come and assist you, have conversations with you, to really just help support you in any way possible and really being inclusive with your services, but also connecting families to the services that are out in your community. Another thing that's in both of that second column for both age groups is CCR&R. Your local CCR&Rs at the coalition will help your families get resources. So think about the family who comes in who has a child with a challenging behavior, and you're trying to give them advice, but in the back of their head, they're trying to figure out how they're going to pay their electricity bill and how they're going to afford groceries. They can't access those types of skills in their brain if they can't meet their basic needs. And so your CCR&R teams locally can come in and support you and the families to make sure that they have what they need, as well as also connect them to other resources in the community. Also, when you think about how to get into programs, there is a national program and a type of funding called IDEA funding. They're separated into 2 parts. And that's when the age differentiation happens. So for your children that are birthed through 2 years old, they actually will access Part C services. And how they get into those services or how they get assessed to see if they're eligible for those services is through the Early Steps program. This is part of the Department of Health, and they run this program statewide, and they are the ones who facilitate, one, connecting to the funding, doing the assessment, but also they help walk the family through the process of gaining those services and interventions. Once the child turns 3, it transfers over into the Part B side of the world, and Child Find is who goes to connect with the families. They actually work with the Department of Education and the Bureau of Exceptional Education and Student Services to administer Part B. So as confusing as that may be, we want to make sure that it's a clear understanding. So you have warm line and inclusion specialists, you've got CCR&R no matter what age, but when you really want to dive into the depth of having funding for services and therapies, if it's a child that's birthed through age 2, all the way through that age 2 year, you're going to go to Early Steps, and they will connect you to services. If it's 3 through 5, you're going to look for Child Find, and Child Find will connect you to the Part B services. So that's a really brief overview, but we wanted you to understand how this funding works and who's out there to support you, and make sure that you as a provider know where to go and how to navigate this very complicated system. So what are some other resources? We've talked about the warm line, we've talked about the specialized care team, Early Steps, and Child Find, but we wanted to make sure that you knew what else was out there for you. So one thing that we would suggest is if you have a child who's currently accessing services through your Part C and Part B services, you have current service providers that are serving them. And so if you can reach out to the therapists and the counselors, the infant toddler specialists, ask them to come into your classrooms. Ask them to come in and use those therapies and services in front of you so that you can then integrate things into your classroom. You obviously can't do everything, but there are small things that you can pick up and start using on a day-to-day basis, which will then help increase their chances of the intervention working and being successful. Another group we have around the state are mental health consultants. And when you hear mental health, that tends to scare people because you start to think of really scary kinds of disorders, but mental health is the same as physical health. It's just dealing with the social and emotional growth of a child and the mental health of the child as they develop. So mental health consultants can come in and do some coaching. They can do reflective supervision with your teachers to really work on how to help get more information to really raise the quality of our mental health of the children in our state. So that's another group. You also have TATS. TATS is a discretionary project of DOE. It's Technical Assistance and Training System, and this is for your 3 to 5-year-olds in that Part B side of the world. And TAPS can go and offer professional development to the teachers. They can offer advice and give some solutions for how to really put inclusive practices in the classroom. So just to clarify, because I see a question that popped up, do we do the warm line or early steps directly? So I would suggest you reach out to your coalition first. They will guide you through the process. They can walk you through how to get to the referral to your inclusion specialist at the coalition, and then have them guide the next steps. If for some reason you're not able to access them, which hopefully never happens, but if it does come up on a day that you're needing immediate help, you can reach out to Early Steps and they can help walk you through the process. The great part of all of this is all of these people is that they all know each other, so they can really help you navigate, because this is a pretty complicated system. But we did want you to see some other resources and community partners and state partners that you have out there to support you if you have a child with a challenging behavior that may need access to services. Some tools that are available to you without having to go and access funding or things like that are these two tools available from the office. So the CLASS tool, which is the Classroom Assessment Scoring System, is a tool that measures interactions. For those of you who are in the Early Learning Performance Funding Project, you have access to this. And then also the coalitions all have class assessors that can also come and help you out in your classrooms to get a gauge of what's happening in the interactions between the teacher and the child. Now, I can tell you as a teacher, when I first went through the class training, I remember thinking, man, I wish somebody had taught me this. I wish I had known this down to the depths of where it takes you as a teacher, because inside of that tool, it will really help you target what areas of growth you need to look at as a teacher. While you may be incredibly kind and warm, you may need to further strengthen your the way you ask questions or the way you do your instructional support. So it's really great to see how this tool can help you really refine your skills as a teacher. Another tool that's available is the B-Piece, and this is available on our website. The only tool available right now is for practitioners. The directors will be coming soon. But what we try to do with this tool is take, again, this very complicated issue of trying to be inclusive in our education programs and making it user-friendly. It's a self-assessment that you can use to take a look at your classroom and see what's happening, see how things are going, and just really set goals for your professional development and how to really make your classroom more inclusive. Again, that's on our website. And so that's available to you at any time.
So before we get into the next best practice, we're going to tell the story of Charlie again, but this time from a slightly different perspective. So this is the story of Charlie, take 2. This is Charlie and Mrs. Patty. Hi everyone, my name is Charlie. I just turned 3 and I'm on my way to preschool. So you already know we had a really stressful morning, that my mommy is mad about my dilly-dallying, and then I had a really hard time separating from her at school because we were in a bad place with each other. But this time, Miss Patty is in charge. She comes over with the warmest smile and says to my mommy, "Tough morning, huh? Don't I know about those?" Wow, my mommy relaxes a little. Then Miss Patty crouches down to my eye level and says, "Charlie, we are so glad to see you. I know it's hard to say goodbye to Mom sometimes, but she needs to go do her job, and guess what? You also have an important job to do. That's right, feeding the fish." I see Mommy give a big smile to Miss Patty. Then she gives me a big hug and tells me that she knows I'm going to be a great helper and to have a great day. I'm so proud and excited to help Miss Patty that I don't even watch my Mommy go out the door. Then Joey arrives. I am so happy to see him. I pull on his arm to take him over to the sand table to play, but oh no, he says I'm hurting him. I wanted him to play. Miss Patty comes over and gently puts her arm on mine and says, "Are you trying to get Joey's attention, Charlie?" "Exactly, Miss Patty, spot on." Then she explains, "Grabbing someone's arm hurts, and I know you don't want to hurt Joey, so let's find another way to let him know what you're thinking, like using your words. Can you tell Joey what you want to do with him?" And with her help, I do. Then Joey and I have so much fun at the sand table building a sand cave for our animals. Next, it's circle time. Miss Patty knows how hard it is for me to sit still, so she gives me a squishy ball that I can squeeze so I can move my body without disturbing the group. Miss Patty really gets me. And then, when I start to hop up and down like the frog in the book, instead of getting mad at me, she suggests that we all get up and act out the story. She turns my idea into something that makes everyone happy. Later on the playground, a bunch of kids are playing a chasing game that looks like so much fun, so I join in. I get really close to Layla and I tag her, but I accidentally push her too hard and she falls down. Miss Patty comes over and says, "Charlie, it looks like your body got really revved up and you didn't know your own strength. You didn't mean to push Layla down, but it's still important to apologize and make sure that Layla is okay," which Miss Patty helps me do. Then she has another great idea. She announces that we're all going to get our energy out by playing a game where we push each other on a scooter to the other side of the playground. This way I can use all of my pushing power, but in a fun, safe way that I can do with my friends. Now it's time to go home. When Mommy picks me up, Miss Patty tells her how much energy I have and how my body craves movement, but that it's not my fault. It's just how I'm wired. I think that's the funny word she used. She explains that we are working on ways to help me learn to control my body and my feelings, and how proud she is of me for trying so hard, because it is really hard work. Mommy looks so happy, and she gives me a big hug. Miss Patty also tells Mommy that she has put a list in my backpack of stuff that she and Daddy can do at home to help me be more in control, so that we can have less anger and more love. So in the second scenario, we see the same behaviors, but a completely different reaction on the part of the teachers and a completely different outcome for Charlie. Why? Well, because Miss Patty has had specific training on understanding the root causes of challenging behaviors. She's also benefited from the modeling and support of her supervisor on how to remain empathetic and loving while also setting appropriate limits and providing Charlie the tools he needs to cope and adapt in a group setting, skills that he's going to need to succeed and thrive later on in the outside world. Equally important, Patty's program sees parents as partners. They don't blame or criticize, which only alienates families. They are empathetic to the challenges that parents face, and they see their role as helping parents understand and nurture their children's healthy development. So although today we are focusing on supporting early childhood programs and caregivers, it's important to note that we also need to support parents in nurturing positive social emotional development starting from birth. Quality programs will try to do both.
So here's the point where we wanted to go into how do we unpack that story and really take some skills out of it that we can then take and move into practice in our own world. So the first thing that we wanted to take a look at was thinking the best. So we chose this one first because the University of Oregon did a study. Take a deep breath, think about the story a little bit differently, and see the best in the child. And so by doing this, they actually decreased. We thought this would be a great place to start, and we're calling it thinking the best. There are other people that call it positive intent, but we want to change the mindset of how we react to children. So the idea on this is I'm going to reframe the story. I'm going to pause long enough to think about it differently and keep myself regulated so that I can then bring the best skills to help coach the child. So a good example of this is you're driving down the road, someone cuts you off, and you're angry. Some of you are using choice words, some of you are hitting the steering wheel, some of you are taking deep breaths, trying to stay calm. But if you knew that that car was on their way to deliver a child, you really wouldn't mind, and you would scoot over and get out of the way. Now, we know that that may not be true, but it keeps you in the right state to then be regulated to do something about it. So in this situation, you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to handle all of this? How can I add this in? But this actually helps you so that you don't get to that place in your brain. You stop, you take a moment to take a deep breath and reframe the situation so that you see it differently. So what we want to do now is we're going to take about 30 to 45 seconds. We're going to give you a second to read through these bullet points. And then what we're going to do is go through using the question box, and we're going to work through these together to try to get a new way to reframe these. So take about 30 seconds, 30 to 45 seconds, read the bullets, and then we'll come back and we'll use that question box to see how we can see things differently. Okay, so let's take a look at this. And like I said, you can use that question box to help us reframe. Feel free to type in. So what's another way that we can they're just trying to get my attention.
If they're just as that the child has a new baby at home, mom has a new baby, and he's not getting much attention at home, and he needs some attention. Maybe he's had a bad morning, or maybe he just needs a hug.
Mm-hmm. So how about you? Let's see. Type in the box and let us see if you have any ideas on another way we could see the child. One suggestion is, maybe there is some sort of lack of connection between you and the child. And we all know as early educators that when a child isn't connected and that part of their needs aren't being met, then they can't do anything else. It's a priority need to feel connected before they can start exploring. So we know that sometimes just trying to get my attention is something that really could be a connection problem. I like this. Thank you, Kiana. He may need some help with something. Stop and focus and see if you can help. They're feeling overwhelmed. They're feeling frustrated. Those are great. Thanks, Tracy. Maybe they lack positive connection. Thank you, Sarah. They feel left out in the classroom. That's great, Tina. Thank you. So thank you for those. Let's move into the next one. So she's just plain lazy. We hear this a lot, unfortunately. And so one of the things with kids is kids often get overwhelmed. And so maybe instead of she's just plain lazy, she needs help getting started. This happens a lot with my 7-year-old daughter when I walk in her room and she says she just can't clean her room. And I have to say, do you want to start with the Barbies or the books? And that helps her get started. But let's take a look at what you said. So it looks like she may not have gotten enough sleep. That's great. They may be tired or not feeling well that day. They may have some delays and not necessarily know how to start. They don't understand, don't comprehend. These are all really great. So we can structure that differently, because if we see a child that's tired, or a child who may be overwhelmed, or a child, thank you, Mary, that may need a meal or a snack, we're not actually looking at a child and calling them lazy, which means we're going to bring the best of us to that moment. So let's do the next one.
He's a mean kid. He's just frustrated he's just hurtful for no reason. It could be that he lacks the social skills to know how to approach other children or get along with other children. It could be that he sees that modeled at home, that they're not very kind to each other or helpful with each other. Or it could be that he is just feeling bad and having a bad day.
So I see a lot of you are agreeing, seeing things at home, seeing violence at home, mimicking behavior. Maybe they just roughhouse at home and it just may not be appropriate for the classroom. He may not know his strengths. That's right, Janice. Thank you. Where's the child's birthplace? And are they the oldest or the youngest? That's actually really great too. They may be seeking connection, and maybe the negative attention comes for them, and that helps fill that need. Communication skills, social skills. They don't know personal space and that of others. Oh, these are so amazing. You guys are doing such a great job with this. So seeing that differently, we see a child who may be discouraged and disconnected versus seeing a child who we have been labeled as mean. And so it gives us the ability to address that child with the missing skill instead of actually looking at the child as being a mean kid who's just hopeless. So it's really important that we view it that way. So the next one, she's jealous. So take a second, and I want to see what you say about jealous. So one of the things that I would say on this one while you're typing is that sometimes jealousy may be what it looks like on the outside, but it may also be a lack of connection. It may also be that maybe they don't feel included. Maybe they feel like they don't have something that is their own at home. Maybe they share everything, and sometimes they don't know how to share. So this to them is a need for them to actually have something of their own, and maybe you could keep some things for them in their backpack that are just theirs.
Maybe it's that they've never had to share because they're an only child at home, or maybe they have a new baby brother or sister at home and they don't get a lot of attention, so they're kind of jealous of mom and dad's attention because baby gets all the attention right now.
So again, a connection issue, absolutely. And we know at this age we can't share, so we're taking turns. We're trying to teach that, but they don't really have a huge capacity for sharing until they're a little bit older. And so I really like that, giving children individual attention, making sure that that she's staying connected to her caregivers. And I'm going to let Molly do the next one. I always pass this one to Molly because Molly has a substantial amount of children, so she actually can understand this.
So, and I care about all of my kids. But, if you think, oh, she just doesn't care about her kids because she runs in, she drops them off, and she just runs off, doesn't, stop to see how their day was or, see what kind of things happen. that could be she does have 6 kids and she's doing it all on her own and she's trying to make ends meet and has no help at all. So that could just be one way of looking at it.
I love your feedback. She might have a lot on her plate and doing the best she can with little to no support.
Overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed.
Absolutely.
Yep. Absolutely. Has 2 jobs. You just never know. Relies on public transportation. She's very busy. These are all things that can manifest as somebody who looks like they're neglectful, but they're not. It could be just that they're overwhelmed. Go ahead.
And I really like this one, Tina, that you put in that maybe doesn't know how to show affection. Maybe she was never shown affection as a child, and that's just how she was raised. So
on one of our previous webinars, someone said they may look strict and rigid, but it's because they're trying to have some control in a life that feels overwhelming. And I loved that perspective. So seeing that differently then opens your heart to really be willing to actually go out and connect with this mom instead of having the judgment shut that door down. So like I said, go ahead.
Sometimes they don't know how to communicate with the staff or with teachers. They may be, in the past, have a negative interaction with professionals, and they feel kind of shy or
unwilling to be vulnerable.
Sarah says she may be just in need of support, even if it's just someone to stop and smile and greet her positively.
Absolutely. Just like in the story with Miss Patty where she said, it's been a long morning and I get it. And that meant so much to the mom in the story. Micah, thank you. She may be in a hurry. She could have kids like mine, and it take a million times to tell them to get up, and just don't until you physically help them and walk them to the bathroom. I have slow children in the morning, too, so I can totally relate. So, yes, it could be that she's in a hurry. So you guys are great at this already. So as a community and as a field that we then can help parents and help children see themselves differently. And one of the things that you may feel, depending on how you were raised, is you may feel like you're letting them off the hook. And so before we move on to the next skill, I just want you to stop and take a minute and think about the person that saw the best in you when you couldn't see it in yourself. We've all had them at some point, a parent, a mentor, a boss, a friend, someone who could just see the best in you even when you weren't at your best. See their face, think about what they said to you, and I guarantee you never felt like they let you off the hook. And so it's really, really crucial that we can see the best in kids when sometimes they can't see the best in themselves, as well as our families, so that then we don't address the issues or the things that come up in class with a judgmental tone, but we remain regulated and offer the best skills to coach the child. Okay, so our next skill is empathy. Now, empathy is one of my favorite skills because it requires you to take a situation and look at it as it is. So my favorite moment, not my favorite moment, but my favorite moment to talk about that represents these moments as a teacher was in my 2-year-old classroom, and the kids are dumping and filling in the block center, which means they were not filling, but just dumping. So I have a massive pile of animals, blocks, cars, and of course we just cleaned the room. It's time to go to the playground. I've got a kid beside me yelling my name constantly. I've got someone going through the lunch boxes and taking them out. And so I'm in this moment, and my first thought was, I don't get paid enough for this. This is not okay. And so I had to really stop and take a moment to keep me regulated so that then I could then address what was happening in the room. So when you can take the moment and just see it as it is, don't try to say what it should be. I could have said, oh, they should not be getting in the lunch boxes. Oh, they should not be dumping things. They know to keep the room clean. I just told them we're cleaning up to go to the playground. They should not be calling my name. They know to tap me and ask me for something. They should. And we could do that all day long, but it actually doesn't change our brain state to a place where we can actually be helpful. So we're going to stop and take a deep breath and accept the moment as it is and just say it is what it is. And then what we're going to do is see the child who's struggling and help empathize with them. If we can label how they're feeling and what's going on with them and empathize what their need was in that moment, then we can stay regulated and help them identify what they need to regulate to move forward. So for example, if I come up and snatch a block away from someone and I walk up, like the first example with Charlie, and say, stop, give that back, instead of saying you wanted to turn, you ask turn please next time, I never would be able to address that skill if I wasn't having empathy with what his initial need was, which is that he wanted to play with the block. And so from that point forward, when I can label it and be empathetic with the child, it helps them tune into what they need and helps them regulate it as well. This starts as soon as in our infant classroom with the first time they cry, and you take a deep breath and you breathe with them and say, you've got this, you can handle this, I'm going to keep you safe. And we know that this is so crucial because what we say to children in these moments is what they then will say to themselves. Sina, I love your comment, how it's hard to teach new teachers this because it's self-regulation, and you're right. These are easy skills to shift to try, but they are hard to maintain. And so these are just a few things that we know are to start us on a path to a really difficult journey of trying to look at things differently and trying to see kids differently. But hopefully this will be something that you can take back and put into place pretty quickly. So thank you for your comment. So empathy, that's another skill we really wanted to focus on. So we've got seeing the best in the child, taking a deep breath and pausing, empathy, accepting it how it is, regulating with the child, helping them understand what's happening and what their needs were. And then we're going to move into the overarching concept, which is creating a caring community and culture. So this is the idea that everyone in our school community, our school family, if you'd like to call it that as well, has a culture of unity and that we're all in this together. Part of how you do this is in the community, you have this idea that everyone has value. So when a teacher is absent for a day, you go back and greet them and welcome them back and tell them how the school family is just not the same without them. With children, the same way when they're out. Parents, when they've been gone on a trip, you remind them, if you can remember to try to go in and take the time to notice that they were gone and missing. And so one of the ways that you do that is through that, but also by creating jobs. Everyone has a job. So Charlie was the fish, and to him that meant so much that no one else was going to take care of that fish without him being there. And so he had a value and a role to play in keeping their community safe. So that's another good component of it. Another way is rituals and routines. I always use the example of the fact that I'm a University of Georgia graduate and a massive Georgia Bulldog fan. So I could go to an international airport and someone could walk by me and say, "Go Dogs," and we're instantly connected because that's what we do. And so I think if you could, so the point of this is that if you can create rituals and routines that are unique to your care and unique to your home or your center or your school, this will create this identity of this is what we do. And so the conversation changes from you need to keep your friends safe to in our school community or in our school family, we keep each other safe. That's our job. And so it changes this we, this I concept into a we, so that everyone feels like they're a part of this. So those are three really quick things that you can take a look at. And I know that they're pretty complicated concepts, but we wanted to show you a video that actually goes into what happens when a child, even though it's in high school, and we'll talk about that in a second, when a child has access to someone who's using these skills.
My name is DJ Baptiste, and I was born in Lacombe, Louisiana. I was raised by my grandmother. I was born to a 14-year-old mom and a 16-year-old dad, so they were young. They really weren't able to make too many decisions. I was very defiant, though. I love to get in trouble because of the getting in trouble got your attention. I was the type of student where I loved attention, and I did whatever it took to get attention. I was the leader of a gang, and let me tell you why, because in a gang, we got a sense of security and a sense of belonging. We feel like these my homies, they're going to take care of me, they got me, no matter what. So they give us that sense of belonging, fight. That was our only option. We had a disagreement, we fought. Whether we playing basketball, playing hide and go seek, it didn't matter. If it's a disagreement, we fight. So I was raised like that, and that was instilled in my head. There was no other option. You fight, you fight, you fight. You got to be violent. And I'm gonna tell you, we like to fight in school because we know we had a crowd, so we continue to get kicked out of school. We jump.
Sorry about that.
Huge into my head, that's what I did. If I wanted to fight, boom, I'm fighting. If you're close enough where I can put my hands on you, I'm hitting you in your mouth. That's just how I was. I did go to juvenile twice.
My name is Donna Porter, and I teach public speaking at Peking Memorial High School in Peking, Mississippi.
I knew. I sat back and thought about it. When you late to something, everybody looks at you.
And all of a sudden, the door flings open, and this huge student that I've never seen in my life walks in and says, "What's up?"
And she looked, and I said, "What's up?" You know, and I just had the attention of the class that fast.
My first thought is, why did this happen to me? On the first day of school when I'm trying to set the tone, and then I thought, I've got this. Thank goodness I've got this. But to be able to access my brilliance, I have to take a deep breath, stay composed, and watch him, look at his nonverbal language, because all behavior is purposeful.
She said, "Well, I know you're late to my room. There's no problem because you probably couldn't find it." I just kind of looked at her with this crazy look like, yeah, whatever. And then she was like, "Well, have a seat." And I looked at her, I said, "Do you have any kids?"
And I said, well, actually, your name is DJ, Mr. Baptiste. I have two, and I just informed the class about it, but because you missed my room, he said, and I said, actually, I just told the class I've been married for 30 years.
I stepped back and said, 30 years? Folded my arms, looked up and down and said, don't you think it's time for a change? Now, at that point in time right there, I expected her to get red in the face, lose her composure, run to her desk, get a referral, write me up, and send me out. I was ready for that. That's what I expected. And now that I've learned the brain seeks patterns. So that was the pattern that my brain was seeking. You be disrespectful, you get sent out of class, but you get the attention that you want. She didn't do that. She looked at me, she smiled, and said,
do you go to the doctor when you're well? And he looked at me very funny and said, no, you do when you're sick. He said, I guess not. I guess you come supposedly to learn. I said, well, you've got a lot to learn, and I can't wait to teach you. And then I left him with that feeling of angst. And then I said, you know, I've noticed more importantly about you. You have charisma.
Charisma? You know, she was like, do you know what that means? I said, I'm cute. And everybody in the class laughed, and she was like, something like that. She was like, but you just know how to work a room, you know? And I said, I was just listening to her. She was like, she threw me off because she started talking good about me after I wanted her to be kind of get into a power struggle with me. That's what I wanted.
And I said, so I've been thinking in the last few seconds, I give jobs to my students in high school. Do you know anything about jobs in school? He said, oh yeah. In kindergarten, I was the line leader. I said, well, we don't have a line leader in high school. We have appropriate jobs. And I usually take a week or so to figure out what job would best fit what student. I do a multiple intelligence survey, and we tell a little bit about ourselves. But you know what, DJ? I don't need to do all that with you. Because you're innately designed to be a greeter. He's like, a greeter? What's that? And I said, a greeter is someone that will stand at my door every morning.
As everybody coming out, I get to shake everybody's hand, appropriately hug the girl. That threw my mind off. And then she said, on top of that, I get to come in front of her class and have my own session for 2 to 3 minutes. How does that sound? That's what she said. I said, it sounds too good to be true, so let me run it back to you. I said, so you mean to tell me I get to stand outside your classroom, shake everybody's hand who comes by. Then on top of that, I get to come in front of the class to have my own session. She was like, yeah. I said, well, I want, you know what I'm saying, I want to try this. She was like, but it's one catch. And I remember I dropped my head like I knew it was something, you know.
All you have to do is be on time.
Because if you're my greeter, that means you have to be the first one here so everybody get a chance to see you and shake your hand before they walk in my classroom. I just remember shaking my head like, all right, I try this, you know. I see what it's something here I can't tell yet, but it was something there, and I just remember thinking I try this. And she said, okay, pick up your backpack, let you sit down, and go have a seat. And that was the first day of my new life.
Day 2, I'm standing in the hall and I see this mass of people just partying, and the only figurative language I can think of is Moses parting the Red Sea. And here comes this huge guy, and I hear these words that are so important for anybody watching this video. Everybody move out of my way. I've got to get to Miss Porter's class on time because, listen, I have a job to do. I have a job to do. A disconnected child. He needed to be encouraged, and every day he stood from day 2. He had been in the criminal justice center, he had been expelled from the alternative school, he had been in school out isolation, out of school suspension. Nothing worked. All he needed was to be encouraged. And he became my greeter. We usually have jobs just every 9 weeks, but by a unanimous vote of the class, he became the year-long greeter because they felt nobody could do the job as well as DJ.
I feel like the experiences that I went through in my life was meant to happen so I can come back and help kids, help teachers understand. I feel like I have a gift that I need to share, a testimony that I would like to share, and I know I can help kids along with teachers. Oftentimes teachers get into it with students, they have problems with students because they don't have the skills. And I feel like anytime I can help a teacher get the skills, she has a chance to save a life. And
So we by no means are pushing conscious discipline above any other discipline, but this is a fantastic story of a kid who in high school had a teacher who could see the best of them, that see the best in him, took a moment, had empathy, and realized what was underneath all of that behavior. And so I think about this as an example in high school, because in early learning, we know we have the biggest impact on brain development and on life development than any other age. So imagine this is happening in high school, what we can do in early learning. So this was just one example of some best practices. We're going to go into some family engagement things as well, but we wanted to make sure that you saw what actually can happen in a child when we start to just see things a little bit differently.
One of the best practices that we hope you will address is family-friendly environment. We want to make sure that your program is family-friendly. Families need to be an active and involved part of your school community, and you need to focus on building positive relationships with families, because that's essential to the success of the children. All families need to be treated the same. They need to be treated equitable. We want to make sure that if their child is having difficulties, if you're having some differences with the family, that the child and the family is treated the same as everyone else, that they're not marginalized just because of what's happening in the classroom or between the adults. We want you to focus on what you want. What do you want to see in the classroom? What do you want to do with families? Because you're going to get more of what you're giving attention to. So if you give attention to the positive, you're going to get positive in return. If you give negative feedback, then you're going to get negative feedback. Families need to know that they're not alone with regard to challenging behaviors in children. There are supports out there to help them and their children, and we hope that you will find those supports for them and help direct them to those supports. Another best practice with family engagement, and Erin has mentioned this before, is the specialized care team. It's a group of individuals who work together to plan for individual needs and goals of a child. You should make sure that you advocate for families to be a part of that specialized care team for their child, and that you let them have input and that you value their input. We don't want to just tell them, here's what we've decided we're going to do with your child. You want them to have input. Parent education is essential for resources and information related to their child's needs. Resources to reduce stress at home that may be contributing to the negative behaviors, and also to link parents to supports in the community. Providers need to familiarize themselves with those available resources, or at least know where to send the parent or family to find them. A good thing to do is to refer them to the local learning coalition, and CCR&R can connect them with resources that they need outside of school, and maybe help them to find some resources for financial aid, work-related resources, and resources for all the members of their families. There are some quality indicators that are in our position statement that relate directly to this. One of them is to develop positive classroom and program discipline plans that include expulsion and suspension prevention policies, and communicate these plans and policies to parents and guardians. To develop behavior expectations appropriate for the ages and abilities of all children, and teach the expected behaviors explicitly to the children, and then communicate those behaviors to the parents so that they know what to expect at home and what you expect at school. We've already said that professional development is the key to eliminating or reducing the number of expulsions and suspension in early childhood settings. You can see from this list of professional development topics that knowledge and expertise in each of these areas is a vital part of supporting children and families. Developmentally appropriate practices help teachers to have expectations that are appropriate of children, to arrange their classrooms in ways that are developmentally appropriate, and to have rules and routines that are developmentally appropriate. It's important that providers and teachers know all about social emotional development and how to support children at every stage of social emotional development, and how to relate that to families, to involve families and have many ways of engaging families in their child's learning, to have emotionally safe classrooms, to know what that looks like, what it sounds like, and what it feels like, to know about trauma-informed care, how they can support families that have been through trauma, how they can support children who have experienced trauma, and how to support themselves if they've experienced trauma. They need to know about cultural responsiveness so that they can involve families in the diverse families in their community and be able to relate to those families and communicate with those families appropriately. And they need to know about implicit bias, because that's a factor in a lot of expulsions and suspensions. Okay, now we're going to talk about writing your own policy. And when you start to write your policy, you want to begin with a purpose or an intent. Why is this policy important for the children, families, and staff in your program? And what will be addressed within the policy? Here we have two different examples of language that a program may use to tell parents about their expulsion and suspension policies. The first one says, our program is committed to providing a safe, nurturing environment conducive for learning and growth for all of our children. We strive to ensure all of our children are set up for success regardless of their need or developmental level. The second one starts off, unfortunately, there are sometimes reasons we have to expel a child from our program on either a short-term or a permanent basis. We want you to know that we will do everything possible to work with the family of the child in order to prevent this policy from being enforced. The following are reasons why we may have to expel or suspend a child from this center. Now, both of them are addressing the purpose, but if you're a parent and you look at both of them, which one is going to make you feel more secure and that maybe this would be a good place to put your child? If they start off with talking about expulsion right off the bat, then you might not even know that there's such a thing as an expulsion in early childhood programs. So that might be a little off-putting. But if you look at the first one, our program is committed to providing a safe, nurturing environment. That makes you feel that this might be a good place for your child. You need to make sure that you specifically spell out in your policy the program's reasons for expulsion, suspension, and dismissal. If your program doesn't use suspension or expulsion as a policy, then you would want to state this explicitly. We do not expel or suspend children in our program. If you look at the wording on this one, every effort will be made to prevent the expulsion or dismissal of children from the program. However, and then you put the name of the program, reserves the right to cancel the enrollment of a child for the following reasons. And then it lists the reasons. It says the first two, non-payment or excessive late payment of fees and tuition, and failure to adhere to policies and procedures in the program's family handbook, those are not really the child's problem. Those are parental actions. So that wouldn't really be an expulsion or suspension. That would be a dismissal. The child has needs which we cannot adequately meet with our current staffing patterns. That's a legitimate reason that you would expel or suspend a child. That relates to the child's behavior or needs. And then the next one, the child's behavior threatens the health and safety of him or herself, the other children or program staff. That would be one. And then the last one, the parent guardian exhibits behavior which is detrimental to the health and well-being of children and staff. That is, again, a parental action, so that's a dismissal. But the way that they stated the two for the children, the child has needs which we cannot adequately meet with our current staffing patterns, that's realistic and it's stated positively. And that the child's behavior threatens the health and safety of others, that's realistic and it's stated in a non-threatening way. Combining expulsion and prevention with a behavior or discipline policy is a great way to address the topic. If the discipline or behavior policy informs the parents of the expectations the staff have of the children and what the staff does to support these behaviors, with a focus on positive behaviors and developmental appropriate expectations of children at all age levels, and frequent communication with families. It will show parents that the staff do everything they can for children and parents to avoid expulsions and suspensions of children. Expulsion does not need to be a standalone policy, and is better understood by parents as part of the overall behavior or discipline policy. So if you look at these two, the first one says, thank you for choosing to allow our staff to support your child's development. We are committed to each child's social and emotional development, so we do not dismiss children from our program because of concerns with behavior. Behavior concerns tell us that children need more time, support, and practice to develop their social and emotional skills. When serious concerns arise, we will partner with parents and professionals who specialize in supporting children's social and emotional health. On rare occasions, we may work with families to seek the best care for their child if all parties agree that our program can no longer meet the needs of an individual child. So that's telling you to do what the provider is going to do, and it's presented in a way that shows how supportive they are of the family and of the child. But it doesn't say that they will not expel the child, because at the end it's saying that on rare occasions the child may need a different program, and then they're going to help with that transition to another program. If you look at the bottom, it lists the actions that would result in expulsion: failure of a child to adjust after a reasonable amount of time, uncontrollable tantrums, angry outbursts, bullying, hurting, pushing, kicking, threatening other children, and other at the discretion of the director. Those are indeed that program's expulsion policy, and it states explicitly what the child will be expelled for, but it's not quite as family-friendly and supportive as the first language. So it's real important the way that you state the words, that it truly reflects what you want to say about expulsion and suspension and how your program wants to support the families and the children at that time. So this one focuses on steps taken prior to expulsion or suspension. Focusing on the preventive measures that would help with expulsion and suspension is very important. Here it's saying that positive intervention supports include screening, classroom environment assessments, reaching out to inclusion specialists. All of these are telling the positive things that will take place before any suspension is even mentioned or begun. So that it's saying that we're going to help your child. We're going to find out what's causing the problem. Is it the environment? Is it the child's behavior themselves? And we're going to communicate with parents to make sure that you know how. If you look at the little box down at the bottom, proactive actions that will be taken in order to prevent expulsion, this tells exactly what the staff will do, the teacher will do, or the provider will do, and how they're going to support that child that's having these problems. It also says that the child and parent will be notified, and that the director and parent will have a conference, and that the specialized care team will be called in to address how to best support the child and help that family. It's very important that you communicate with parents, that you have that positive relationship and trusting relationship with families, and that you may want to include something in your policy like this. Our families communicate regularly with staff. They partner with us. They understand and acknowledge that we do not expel children, or if you do, you can leave out that part if you do expel children. And it says how that they best serve the children. Providing the family with resources and assistance in locating programs if they do need to transition to another provider for a better fit for the child will help both the child and the family. The family and child care experiencing trauma, the family and child are experiencing trauma in this situation, and sometimes the provider is too, and anything that will help to alleviate some of the stress in their lives will help the child's transition to another provider be easier for all concerned. Okay. So that gives you some ideas of what you could write into your policy, but we want to note that we do not give you a template. You do not have a template from us because we don't know what your policy is. We don't know what your program is like. And it's important for you to put what you feel and believe into your policy. It has to be unique for your situation, for your home daycare, for your center, and that it reflects truly what you and your staff believe in and what you're willing to do and what you're hoping to do for families, how you're going to support the child and the families through this. We also have some prevention, some expulsion and prevention toolkit full of resources for you. We've gathered resources that are available to help you create your expulsion and suspension policy. These resources and other resources are available in the School Readiness Inclusion Dropbox or the Child Care Resource and Referral Dropbox. You can access those through your coalition, or we will send you a link to these Dropboxes. They're national resources and resources from other states as well as resources from Florida. Some of the resources are like the ones we have attached from Arkansas. And we want to make sure that the policies, that you are comfortable in writing your policies, and if you need assistance, that you contact your local coalition or you can contact us.
Okay. And just to add on to what Sunny was saying and what I mentioned earlier about our website on the Health and Safety tab, we are going to be compiling a folder with links to all of these resources, with the resources that we've attached in the handout section, a copy of the PowerPoint. All of that stuff will be available on our website. It'll probably take about a week to get up there. So if you need anything in the meantime, please feel free to reach us directly and we'll get it to you directly. But just to provide a brief summary on what the actual requirement is for school readiness programs. So everything that Sunny was talking about with regard to what are some of the best practices that should be included in your policy, what should it actually state, you want to make sure that you're writing your policy so that parents are aware and the expectations are clear for all parties involved on what that program's policies are. What are you going to do in the event of challenging behaviors or children who need special accommodations? So the school readiness standard, the requirement, doesn't specifically state what has to go in your policy, which is the reason why we didn't provide a template like Sunny said. The requirement itself, just a readiness program, you must have a policy in place. The policy truly does need to be unique to your program and reflect your program's beliefs. In addition to having the policy, a copy of the policy must be available when DCF or the local licensing agency comes out to do that annual health and safety school readiness inspection. So once you get your policy in place, which again, this requirement goes into effect July 1st, 2017, you will need to make sure that you provide that policy to all of the parents of the children you have in your care, and you will need to get a signature from that parent stating that they've received that policy. If you address expulsion or suspension and termination in your discipline policy already, that's great. Like I said, you'll just need that one signature stating that they've received that policy. It can be included in your discipline policy, your behavior policy, your parent handbook, family handbook, whatever you call it, as long as you've addressed expulsion, how your program handles it, and as long as you have that signature from that parent stating they've received it, you would be in compliance. You just want to maintain that in your child's file on site for when you have your annual health and safety inspection. So that brings us to the conclusion. Here is our contact information. Like I said, if you want to reach out to us, if you have any questions in the meantime, or if you need immediate access to some of these resources, we're happy to help with you. Additionally, we do know that this takes up time, and we appreciate you participating. So if you are looking for credit for in-service training, please send me an email, and I will get you out a little letter or certificate that states how long you were engaged in the webinar and that you participated in the webinar, so that you can keep that in your file to track for in-service training purposes.
So we wanted to make sure that you had time for questions. We're going to give it about 30 seconds to give you some time to type some questions. And like Molly said, if in the meantime you want to send an email to Molly about getting an in-service certificate, she will make sure she gets that to you. So her email is right there on the bottom, molly.grant@oel.myflorida.com.
It'll probably take about a week and a half to get all those certificates out, but if you shoot me that email, I will have it, and it will come to you. To whatever email you email me with, that's where I'll send it.
Okay, we'll give it just a few more seconds. If you have questions, feel free to use that question box. Okay, if we do expel a child, if not school readiness, do we need to contact the ELC, or what do we do? So what we would ask for you to do is, if you do not feel you can meet the needs of the child and you've gone through a process of helping them, we would still love for you to reach out to the resources that the ELC offers so that you could possibly help assist the family in finding other child care, or helping the parent maybe find out some things that they could do, have access to for services or resources along the way. So the ELC doesn't just function for school readiness or VPK provider. They are there for the community if you need something. So definitely reach out to them and see if there's any way they can assist in that transition.
Another aspect of that question that we want to touch on is that, and we mentioned this earlier, is that one of our goals with this position statement is that we start gathering this data in the state of Florida so that we really know how it affects our children and our families throughout our state. And so by, even if it's not a school readiness program, even if it's not a school readiness child, if you're reporting that information to the coalition, it really helps us gauge where we are as a state. It's not saying that you would be penalized in any way, because of course this is your policy, it's your program, but it just helps the state really get a feel for how it's impacting our children and families throughout the state.
Liliana, thank you for your compliment. We appreciate it. I'm glad this was helpful. Okay, well, we will go ahead and we'll leave the questions open for a second if you need some more time. But we just wanted to first and foremost thank you for, after a very long day, taking the time to meet with us and to go over this important issue. And as always, please know that we are here to support you. Your coalitions are here to support you. If we can help in any way, or if you have any questions after you get off and think of something, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And thank you from the bottom of our hearts for doing what you do and serving our kids in a field that is very underappreciated and a very hard job to do. So thank you for all that you do. And we will be in touch if you need anything in the meantime. Have a great night, and we hopefully will connect soon. And go dogs to Debbie.